I recently heard church communications expert Brady Shearer make a statement that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said, "The language you use becomes the culture you build." Now, he was talking about church communication, but immediately it made me think of something we discussed in the last video. Trauma-informed ministry isn't a program, it's a culture. And if that's true, then the language we use from the platform matters more than we often realize. Every week, pastors and ministry leaders stand in front of our congregations and we communicate through our sermons, our announcements, our prayers, our invitations, our testimonies, as we introduce songs, and even as we transition from one part of the service to the next, not to mention our business meetings. Each of these speaking opportunities has an immediate purpose: to share information, give instructions, lead people in worship, or proclaim God's word. But they're also doing something else. They're shaping the culture of our churches. I've been thinking about some ways our platform language shapes a trauma-informed culture. First, language reinforces. Every church has core values, and if we say we value compassion, humility, safety, or caring well for people, our language should consistently reflect those commitments. Most pastors have experienced something like this. We spend hours preparing a sermon, and by Tuesday, many people couldn't tell you the 3 main points. That's not because preaching isn't important. It's because people learn through repetition. People remember what we repeat. Think about the values you want your congregation to carry with them. Maybe you regularly remind people it's okay to ask for help, or in a healthy community, no one should have to carry their burdens alone, or what happened to you matters, but it doesn't have the final word. Jesus does. Over time, repeated phrases like these don't just communicate your values, they help shape the culture of your church. So don't be afraid to repeat the values that matter most. Repetition isn't redundant. It's one of the primary ways we shepherd our congregations and shape the culture of our churches. Second, language normalizes. The things we acknowledge from the platform become the things people know they're allowed to talk about. If we never mention counseling, people may assume it's only for someone in crisis. If we never acknowledge that faithful Christians sometimes struggle with anxiety, depression, or the effects of trauma, people may conclude that they're the only ones. Sometimes sharing appropriate parts of our own story can reduce shame and help others realize they're not alone. Second, language normalizes. The things we acknowledge from the platform become the things people know they're allowed to talk about. If we never mention counseling, people may assume it's only for someone in crisis. If we never acknowledge that faithful Christians sometimes struggle with anxiety, depression, or the effects of trauma, people may conclude that they're the only ones. And sometimes sharing appropriate parts of our own story can reduce shame and help others realize they're not alone. When we consistently remind our congregations that suffering is part of living in a broken world, that it's okay to ask for help, that healing often takes time, and that no one has to walk alone, we create a culture where people are more willing to share their stories and seek help when they need it. And over time, people don't just notice what has become normal, they begin drawing conclusions about the kind of church this is. That leads to a third point. Language communicates, or maybe a better word is signals. Long before someone asks for help or shares what happened to them, they're listening. They're wondering, would I be believed? Would I be judged? Would they know what to do? Would they treat me with dignity? Would I receive the help that I need? Whether we realize it or not, we're answering those questions every single week. Every announcement, every prayer, every sermon application, every story we tell, every platform moment communicates something about the kind of church that we're becoming. People shouldn't have to guess how your church will respond. If you've done the hard work of becoming more trauma-informed, developing policies, training leaders, preparing to respond wisely, don't let that remain invisible. Let your congregation know that you've thought about these issues before a crisis ever occurs. Let them hear that you take abuse seriously, that there are trusted leaders they can talk to, that there are clear next steps if they need help, and that your church is prepared to walk with them. Because people don't discover your church's culture by reading a policy manual. They discover it by listening to what you say consistently from week to week. So let me leave you with one question. If someone carrying deep trauma attended your church for 6 months without ever speaking to a leader, what would they conclude about your church just by listening? Because the language you use really does become the culture you build. If you'd like practical next steps for helping your church become more trauma-informed, download our free guide, 7 Steps to Becoming a Trauma-Informed Church at hopescompanion.org/7steps. Thanks for watching.